There are people who can leave a conversation and move on with their day, and then there are those who replay it in their minds like a scene that refuses to end. They analyze the tone of their voice, the exact wording of a sentence, the look on the other person's face. Hours later, sometimes years later, they are still revisiting that moment, dissecting it as if the smallest detail might reveal something catastrophic. If you are someone who overthinks every conversation you've ever had, this isn't random. It isn't because you're dramatic or weak. It is rooted in something deeply human, the need to feel safe, accepted, and understood. Overthinking conversations is rarely about the conversation itself. It's about what the conversation represents. For many people, social interactions are not neutral events. They are evaluations. They feel like subtle tests where belonging is at stake. When you grow up in environments where approval was inconsistent, where love felt conditional, or where mistakes were magnified, your brain learns that social missteps carry danger. Maybe you had caregivers who were unpredictable, teachers who embarrassed you publicly, or peers who mocked you for speaking up. Your nervous system absorbed those experiences and quietly formed a rule. Be careful. Say the right thing. Don't mess up. As a child, you didn't have much control, but you did have the ability to analyze. You learned to scan faces, tones, and silences for clues. You became hyper-aware. That hyper-awareness may have protected you then. It helped you anticipate conflict or avoid rejection. But in adulthood, that same skill turns inward. Instead of scanning for external threats, you begin scanning your own words for flaws. You replay conversations not because you enjoy self-criticism, but because your brain believes it's preventing future harm. After a simple interaction, like a meeting at work or a casual dinner with friends, you might think, did I talk too much? Was that joke inappropriate? Did they look annoyed? The mind tries to solve these questions as if they are math problems. It searches for certainty in a situation that was inherently ambiguous. The problem is that social interactions are rarely clear-cut. People are complex. They may be distracted, tired, or thinking about something entirely unrelated to you. But when you overthink, your mind assumes responsibility for every shift in mood. This pattern often connects to perfectionism. Perfectionism isn't always about achieving high grades or career success. Sometimes it's about being the perfect friend, partner, colleague. You hold yourself to impossible standards of social performance. You believe that if you say everything exactly right, you will secure acceptance. So when a conversation ends, you audit yourself. You measure your words against an invisible standard. And because that standard is unrealistic, you almost always find yourself lacking. There is also a deep relationship between overthinking conversations and anxiety. Anxiety is fueled by uncertainty, and conversations are full of it. You don't know what someone truly thinks of you. You don't know how your words landed. The anxious brain hates this lack of closure, so it replays the interaction again and again, trying to squeeze out a definitive answer. It asks, "Are we okay?" But instead of asking the person directly, it interrogates your memory. The irony is that the more you replay a conversation, the less accurate your memory becomes. Each replay adds interpretation. A neutral expression slowly becomes a frown. A pause becomes disapproval. Your mind fills in gaps with worst-case assumptions. Over time, you don't just remember the conversation, you remember your fear about the conversation. This can quietly affect your relationships. When you assume you've done something wrong, you may withdraw. You might send follow-up texts to clarify, apologize unnecessarily, or over-explain. Sometimes you avoid future interactions entirely. On the outside, people may see you as thoughtful or introspective. On the inside, you are exhausted. Socializing feels less like connection and more like performance. There's also a deeper emotional layer, the fear of being misunderstood. If you have ever felt unseen in your life, if your emotions were dismissed, your intentions questioned, or your words twisted, then being misunderstood doesn't feel minor. It feels like erasure. So you replay conversations to check whether you represented yourself correctly. You worry that someone walked away with the wrong impression. You want to correct it before it hardens into a belief about who you are. This is why overthinking conversations often intensifies at night. In the quiet, when distractions fade, your mind finally has space to process. But instead of gently reflecting, it turns critical. Fatigue lowers your emotional defenses, and suddenly a comment you made 5 years ago resurfaces. You cringe. You feel shame as if it just happened. Your body reacts in real time, heart racing, stomach tight, even though the event is long gone. This is because the brain does not fully distinguish between a vividly imagined threat and a present one. Shame plays a powerful role here. Unlike guilt, which says, I did something wrong, shame says, I am something wrong. When you overthink conversations, you're often trying to outrun shame. You believe that if you analyze every angle, you can prevent being exposed as inadequate. But the constant analysis reinforces the idea that you are one mistake away from rejection. It's important to understand that this pattern developed for a reason. It is not a flaw in your character. It is an adaptation. Your brain learned that safety comes from vigilance. The problem is that it never learned when to turn that vigilance off. Healing begins with recognizing the difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection is gentle and purposeful. It asks, what can I learn from this? And then let's go. Rumination is repetitive and punishing. It asks, what's wrong with me? And never feels satisfied. When you catch yourself replaying a conversation for the 10th time, pause and ask, am I trying to grow? Or am I trying to protect myself from imagined rejection? Another powerful shift comes from challenging the belief that you are solely responsible for how others feel. Conversations are co-created experiences. The other person brings their mood, history, and insecurities into the interaction too. If someone seemed distant, it might reflect their internal world, not your failure. Learning to share that responsibility can reduce the pressure you place on yourself. It can also help to practice self-compassion in real time. After a conversation, instead of launching into critique, try saying, I showed up as I am today. That's enough. This may feel unnatural at first. If you've spent years policing your words, kindness toward yourself might seem undeserved. But self-compassion does not mean ignoring mistakes. It means acknowledging that imperfection is part of being human. For some, deeper work may involve exploring the roots of this pattern. Therapy can be especially helpful in unpacking early experiences of rejection or unpredictability. When you understand where your hypervigilance began, it becomes less mysterious and less shameful. You can begin to thank that younger version of yourself for trying to keep you safe, while gently teaching your present self that the danger has passed. It's also helpful to remember that most people are too busy replaying their own conversations to dissect yours. The harsh spotlight you imagine is often just your own. Realizing this doesn't instantly silence the overthinking, but it can soften its intensity. Imagine what your social life would feel like if conversations were allowed to be imperfect. If pauses were normal, if awkward moments were simply human rather than catastrophic. When you reduce the pressure to perform, connection becomes more authentic. People are drawn not to flawless communicators, but to genuine ones. If you see yourself in this pattern, know that change is possible. The brain is adaptable. Each time you resist the urge to replay, each time you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, you are teaching your nervous system a new lesson. I am safe. I am allowed to take up space. I do not need to be perfect to be loved. Overthinking every conversation you've ever had does not mean you are broken. It means you care deeply about how you impact others. That care is a strength. The goal is not to erase it, but to balance it with trust. Trust that one imperfect sentence will not undo your worth. Trust that people can clarify misunderstandings. Trust that you deserve connection without constant self-surveillance. You are not defined by a single awkward comment, a misplaced joke, or a forgotten response. You are a complex, evolving human being. Conversations are moments, not verdicts. And the more gently you hold yourself, the quieter the replay becomes.